Deirdre, in the wake of the financial crisis, forecasting risks has become downright trendy. Maybe it should be, given what we went through. But some people have been in the business for a lot longer. Down at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, they've been forecasting risks for a quarter century. And for the past 6, they've collaborated with the World Economic Forum on the Global Risks Report, a document that assesses the likelihood and the cost of the world's greatest risks. The 2011 report just came out, and Erwann Michel-Kerjan of the Wharton School is one of the authors. He's with us this morning here in the Inside Track from Philadelphia. Erwann, let's just define a major risk here. You look at everything across the globe and you say that it's something in excess of $10 billion. Is that correct?
Well, correct. Good morning, Eric. I think what we have been trying to do with that somewhat unique initiative of the past 6 years is to take a global view of what we call global risks. So these risks that could have a very severe impact economically, over $10 billion, but also potentially politically, socially around the globe at least one or two continents.
All right, what everybody wants to know is what's at the top of the list. What, in your estimation, is the single biggest risk out there?
Well, I think one thing we have to understand, and I think that's the very innovative part of the Global Risk Report, is that we don't forecast what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after. We take a long-term horizon on these estimates, namely 5 to 10 years horizon. So every year we interview over, this year I think there was 560 experts around the world in the private sector, public sector. We work with the World Economic Forum, as you mentioned, my colleague Howard Conrider and I, and we start thinking about what's going to happen either tomorrow but also in the next 5 to 10 years.
All right, but so you can't, and what is it? What's at the top?
Well, at the top, climate-related risk, fiscal crisis, energy price, most of what you have been covering at Bloomberg TV for the past few days, for sure.
Okay, fiscal crisis. I mean, you mentioned them, fiscal crisis, climate change, natural disasters, big fluctuations in energy prices, and economic disparity. Are people aware of these risks? Do they recognize them, or in some cases, are we still sort of where we were 5 years ago, perhaps a little too complacent?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think we've learned a lot through the crisis. We've learned a lot from Hurricane Katrina here in the U.S. We've learned a lot from many natural disasters that happened last year. I think it's fair to say that now people start realizing that as the world is becoming more and more global, more and more interdependent, the flip side of that globalization is precisely that risks are becoming more and more interdependent as well. So it's not so much about looking at one of these risks in silo, but starting to think more strategically about how these risks interact with each other around the globe. And that's really new. That's really what the Global Risk Report 2011 is doing.
Erwann, we talk, as you point out, a lot about risks here. Today, for example, we're talking about the risk of rising food prices. Oftentimes, we talk about the risk of data security in the context of WikiLeaks. But while some of those risks appear in your report, they're fairly far down the list, we might say. How come? What is it? What's the criteria that determines what the greatest risk is?
Well, I think it's important to ask ourselves a risk to whom? And in that report, we're looking at the risk to society at large. So it's not only a corporation, it's not only a country. It's really looking at the entire globe and saying, okay, how likely is this risk to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? How much would it cost? So what would be very important for corporation A and B may be less important at a planet level, if you wish. So that explains the difference.
Erwann, thanks for joining us here on the Inside Track, raising our awareness of the greatest risks to the global economy.